In the middle of the night, the sky over Isfahan turned from black to blinding orange in less than a second. A fireball rose so high into the air that it could reportedly be picked up by satellites in low orbit. People on the ground felt the shockwave before they even heard the sound. Windows shattered miles away from the blast site. Within hours, footage of the explosion was already spreading across the internet, racking up millions of views overnight. And almost everyone watching it was asking the exact same question. Did the United States just drop a nuclear weapon on Iran? The short answer is no. But what actually happened that night might be far more important than a single nuclear strike. And almost nobody outside of military analysts is talking about why. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now, because this channel breaks down the biggest military and global conflicts happening on our planet, often before the mainstream news even catches up to what's really going on. Let's start from the very beginning, because to understand this strike, you first need to understand the bomb behind it. The weapon used in this attack on Isfahan was not the massive 30,000-pound bomb you may have heard about in the past. This one was reportedly a 2,000-pound bunker buster, sometimes called a deep penetrator munition. And it has one very specific job: punch through layers of rock, concrete, and steel before exploding far underground, in places that ordinary bombs simply cannot reach. Here's a simple way to picture it. A normal bomb hits the surface of a building and detonates right there on impact. A bunker buster does the opposite. It ignores the surface almost entirely. It drills downward first, sometimes burying itself dozens of feet into solid earth, and only after that does it explode. The entire point is not to destroy what you can see from above. The entire point is to destroy what's hidden underneath. And that single detail explains exactly why Isfahan was chosen as the target. Isfahan is not just another city on a map. It is one of Iran's most strategically important military hubs. It's home to facilities tied to Iran's ballistic missile production, missile assembly lines, and underground storage depots built specifically to survive airstrikes. The city also sits near Mount Safi, a mountainous region that has long been suspected of hiding military installations carved directly into the rock. Now here's where this story gets a lot bigger than most people realize. This strike did not happen in isolation. It is part of an ongoing war, one that escalated dramatically earlier this year in a way that honestly sounds like something out of a movie. On February 28, 2026, U.S. and Israeli forces launched a coordinated operation involving nearly 900 separate strikes within just 12 hours. The targets included Iranian missile systems, air defense networks, military infrastructure, and senior leadership figures. And the very first wave of that operation reportedly succeeded in killing Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, along with several other top officials. Let that sink in for a moment. The supreme leader of Iran, a man who had ruled the country for decades, was killed in the opening hours of this conflict. As you can imagine, Iran did not sit back quietly. Within hours, Iran launched a massive retaliatory wave of hundreds of ballistic missiles and thousands of drones, targeting Israeli cities including Tel Aviv and Haifa, as well as American military bases scattered across the region in countries like Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and the UAE. Reports even indicated that neighboring countries like Jordan and Saudi Arabia were pulled into the chaos. This wasn't a limited skirmish anymore. Within a single day, this had become a multi-front regional war involving some of the most powerful militaries on the planet. The killing of Khamenei alone triggered shockwaves far beyond the battlefield. Within days, protests broke out in multiple countries around the world, with demonstrators taking to the streets in opposition to the strikes. In some places, those protests turned violent. Reports from Pakistan, for example, indicated dozens of people were killed and well over 100 injured during demonstrations connected to the conflict. Inside Iran itself, an interim leadership council was reportedly established within just a single day of Khamenei's death, before a new supreme leader was eventually chosen. Think about how fast all of this happened. A foreign airstrike killing the head of state of a major nation, a new government structure forming within 24 hours, global protests erupting almost simultaneously, and a region already sliding into all-out war. This is the kind of event that historians will likely be writing about for decades. And if you think that's intense, wait until you hear what happened next, because Iran's response didn't stop with missiles and drones. In the days that followed, Iran made a move that sent shockwaves through the global economy. It shut down the Strait of Hormuz. For anyone who isn't familiar, the Strait of Hormuz is one of the most critical shipping routes on the entire planet. A massive percentage of the world's oil supply passes through that narrow stretch of water every single day. When Iran closed it off, tankers were stranded, oil prices spiked, and the global economy felt the pressure almost instantly. In response, the United States enforced a naval blockade against Iran, preventing ships from leaving Iranian ports through that strait entirely. According to U.S. Department of Defense estimates, that blockade alone cost Iran nearly $5 billion in lost oil revenue within just a few weeks. So by the time this most recent bunker buster strike hit Isfahan, it wasn't some isolated bombing run. It was just the latest chapter in a war that has been raging for months, involving multiple countries, multiple fronts, and weapons technology most people didn't even know existed until very recently. And the economic ripple effects of all this have been massive. When the Strait of Hormuz situation first unfolded, oil markets around the world reacted almost instantly. Prices spiked, shipping companies scrambled to reroute tankers around the region entirely, and insurance costs for vessels traveling anywhere near the Persian Gulf skyrocketed overnight. For everyday people, that kind of disruption eventually shows up at the gas pump, in the cost of shipping goods, and in the price of everyday products that rely on oil for transportation or manufacturing. So even if you've never thought about Iran, Isfahan, or bunker buster bombs before today, this conflict has very likely already affected your life in small ways you didn't even notice, through higher prices on things you buy every single week. Before we get into the night in Isfahan itself, let's talk a little more about how this weapon actually works, because the engineering behind it is honestly wild when you break it down. A bunker buster doesn't rely on explosive power alone to do its job. The casing of the bomb is built from extremely thick, hardened steel, almost like a giant metal spear. When it's released from the aircraft, it falls at incredibly high speed. And that speed, combined with the weight of the casing, is what allows it to physically punch through layers of concrete, rock, and reinforced structures before the explosive charge inside ever goes off. Inside the bomb, there's a fuse system that's specifically designed to delay detonation. Instead of exploding the instant it makes contact with something solid, the bomb is engineered to count through multiple impacts. So if it punches through a concrete roof, then through another layer of rock, then through another wall, the fuse keeps track of all of that and only triggers the explosion once it's reached the depth it was designed for. In some cases, that depth can be dozens of feet below the surface. This is exactly why these weapons are so terrifying to facilities built underground. You can pour as much concrete as you want on top of a bunker, but if the bomb is heavy enough and falls with enough force, it simply doesn't care. It goes through anyway. Now, let's talk about what actually happened on the ground that night in Isfahan. According to officials who spoke with major news outlets, the strike targeted what's believed to be a massive underground ammunition depot. Intelligence sources suggest the facility may have housed stockpiles connected to Iran's missile production program, and possibly materials linked to Iran's broader nuclear ambitions as well. When the bunker buster bombs hit their target, they didn't just create a single explosion. They triggered what's known as a chain reaction. The initial impact and detonation ignited the munitions stored inside the facility, which then began exploding one after another in a cascading sequence of secondary blasts. That's the real reason the fireball looked so enormous on camera. It wasn't just one bomb going off. It was one bomb setting off an entire underground arsenal in a domino effect. Reports indicate that footage of the strike was shared directly online by President Trump, and within hours, it had been viewed by millions of people across multiple platforms. The footage reportedly showed multiple fiery blasts erupting in rapid succession, with thick plumes of black smoke rising high into the night sky above the city. But here's the part that should really make you pause and think. This wasn't even close to the first time bunker buster bombs have been used against Iran during this conflict. Go back to last year, to an operation that's now widely considered one of the largest stealth bombing missions in American military history. 7 B-2 stealth bombers, aircraft specifically designed to fly completely undetected through hostile airspace, flew nearly halfway around the entire world in a single mission. Their target was Iran's most heavily fortified nuclear facilities, buried deep inside a mountain. These bombers carried 14 of the massive 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs, weapons so large and so specialized that, at the time, only one aircraft on the planet was even capable of carrying them. The facility they targeted was believed by many experts to be completely untouchable using any conventional weapon in existence. Let's talk about the B-2 for a second, because this aircraft itself is almost as fascinating as the bombs it was carrying. The B-2 Spirit is a stealth bomber, meaning it's specifically designed to be nearly invisible to radar. Its shape, its materials, and even the way its engines are built are all engineered around one goal: slipping through enemy airspace completely undetected. For this particular mission, these bombers reportedly flew for well over 30 hours straight, requiring multiple in-air refuelings along the way, just to reach their target, drop their payload, and make it back home safely. Picture that for a moment. A flight crew sitting inside one of these aircraft for over a day straight, flying halfway around the world, carrying weapons that took more than a decade to develop, all to strike a single facility buried inside a mountain. That's the level of planning and resources that went into just one operation in this conflict. And that operation was reportedly the result of around 15 years of development and testing before it was ever actually used in real combat. After that operation, U.S. officials publicly claimed that Iran's nuclear program had been set back significantly, with some officials going as far as to say it had been completely destroyed. But here's where things get controversial. Some intelligence assessments that surfaced afterward suggested the damage may not have been as total as first reported. According to certain U.S. officials, the underground facility may not have been fully destroyed after all, with some estimates suggesting the setback could delay Iran's nuclear program by only a matter of months, not years, and definitely not permanently. And that single detail might explain everything that's happened since. If Iran's most critical nuclear infrastructure wasn't completely wiped out in that first massive strike, then every operation that's followed, including this latest one in Isfahan, could be part of a much longer ongoing campaign. Not a single decisive knockout blow, but a slow, grinding effort to wear down Iran's military capabilities piece by piece, facility by facility, week after week. Now think carefully about the specific weapon used in this most recent strike. It wasn't the giant 30,000-pound bomb this time. It was a smaller, faster, more precise bunker buster, reportedly weighing around 2,000 pounds. And that's not a coincidence. That's a deliberate choice. This newer generation of bunker-busting weapons was specifically developed to replace older bombs that had been in service since the early 1990s. These newer bombs use advanced GPS guidance systems and are specifically optimized to detonate only after they've already penetrated deep underground, making them especially effective against hardened coastal defenses, buried missile storage facilities, and fortified military compounds. In fact, some reports suggest this latest strike on Isfahan may represent one of the very first times this newer generation of bunker buster has ever been used in actual combat, rather than just in controlled testing environments. If that's true, then what happened in Isfahan wasn't just another bombing run. It was a live demonstration in real time of America's next generation bunker busting technology deployed in active combat against a real target in the middle of an ongoing war. Pause and really think about that for a second. We are watching, in real time, the combat debut of weapons systems that were almost certainly designed years ago, tested in total secrecy, and are now being unleashed for the first time on an actual battlefield, with the entire world watching the footage on their phones within hours. It's also worth thinking about why militaries would even bother developing a smaller bunker buster when they already had a 30,000-pound version that worked. The answer comes down to efficiency and flexibility. The giant 30,000-pound bombs can only be carried by one specific stealth bomber, and only a small number of those aircraft exist. Every mission using them requires enormous planning, long flight times, and significant risk. A smaller 2,000-pound bunker buster, on the other hand, can potentially be carried by a much wider range of aircraft. That means more missions can be flown, more targets can be hit, and the overall pace of operations can increase dramatically. In a war that has now stretched on for months across multiple fronts, having a faster, more flexible weapon that can still punch through hardened underground targets is incredibly valuable. It's the difference between using a sledgehammer for every single job versus having a full toolbox of different sized tools depending on what you're trying to break through. So what does all of this mean going forward? If the history of this conflict has taught us anything so far, it's that nothing about this war stays quiet for long. A ceasefire was actually reached back in April of 2026, after roughly 40 days of sustained combat between the two sides. For a brief period, it looked like things might finally be calming down, but that ceasefire didn't hold for long. By early May, the United States had already conducted additional airstrikes on southern Iran and Tehran, reportedly in response to Iran targeting U.S. warships in the region. Officials referred to this new wave of operations using a different code name entirely, signaling that the conflict had simply entered a new phase rather than actually ending. And Iran, for its part, has repeatedly promised retaliation for every single strike against it. Iranian officials have issued statements warning that any further attacks on the country's energy infrastructure or military assets will be met with what they've described as a far more severe response than anything seen so far in this conflict. Here's something else most people don't realize. This conflict isn't just confined to Iran, Israel, and the United States anymore. Retaliatory strikes have already hit targets in neighboring countries, including missile and drone attacks on military bases used by coalition forces in places like Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Soldiers from multiple allied nations have reportedly been caught in the crossfire, with casualties confirmed on more than one occasion across different countries. This is no longer some regional skirmish between two nations. This is a sprawling, multi-front conflict involving some of the most advanced military technology on Earth, unfolding in real time, with consequences for global oil supply chains that the entire world depends on every single day. There's one more thing that makes this conflict different from almost every previous war, and that's the speed at which information spreads. In the past, footage of a major military strike might take days or even weeks to reach the public, often heavily filtered through official government statements. This time, raw video of explosions in Isfahan was circulating on social media within minutes, shared and reshared by accounts tracking the conflict in real time long before any official confirmation came from either side. That means ordinary people watching from their phones are sometimes seeing the war unfold almost as quickly as military analysts and government officials are. Satellite imagery companies have also been releasing before and after photos of strike locations within days of an attack, allowing independent researchers to verify or question official claims about what was actually destroyed. In a strange way, this has become one of the most documented and most visually trackable conflicts in modern history, even while the full truth about battlefield outcomes often remains classified or disputed for months afterward. If you found this breakdown shocking, go ahead and smash that like button and make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next in this region could reshape global politics, oil prices, and military strategy for years to come, and you do not want to miss how this story continues to unfold. Now, here's something worth sitting with before we wrap things up. Every time one of these bunker buster strikes happens, the footage that leaks out looks almost identical. A massive fireball lighting up the night sky, a chain reaction of secondary explosions, thick smoke rising for miles in every direction. And every single time, the same questions get asked online. Was it nuclear? How much damage was really done this time? And is this the strike that finally changes everything? But maybe the real story here isn't about any one single strike at all. Maybe the real story is about the pattern underneath all of it. A pattern of escalation, retaliation, and counter-retaliation that has been repeating itself for months now, with each side testing new weapons, new tactics, and new boundaries every single time. And if that pattern continues the way it has so far, then what we saw happen in Isfahan might not even be the most dramatic strike of this entire conflict. It might just be the next entry in a long, growing list of strikes still to come. What's clear is that this conflict has already changed the way modern wars are fought and watched. Weapons that were once kept secret for years are now being tested on live battlefields. Within months of development, entire economies are being shaken by a single decision to close a shipping route, and millions of ordinary people around the world are now following military strikes, almost like breaking news updates, refreshing their feeds to see what happened overnight in a country most of them have never visited. So here's the question I want to leave you with before you go. Do you think this conflict is actually heading toward some kind of real resolution? Or do you think we're watching the early stages of something that's going to keep escalating for a very long time? Let me know what you think in the comments below, because I genuinely read every single one of them. And if you want to stay updated as this story continues to develop, make sure you're subscribed to this channel, because this conflict is far from finished, and the next major chapter could come a lot faster than anyone expects. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.